Welcome back to this Step It Up Entrepreneur podcast. Your host, Tomas Keenan, coming at you guys today with another amazing guest. And Tony Lopes is coming at us today in Florida, correct, sir? But normally, sometimes New Hampshire, sometimes Florida, which I think is awesome. I want to get into that with you at some point in time during this podcast recording. But, you came over, you came through, I'll call it a podcast booking gauntlet pipeline. Like, we're super picky about we allow onto the show, and we've got a really good process in place to get the right people on. And if you got to this point, like I tell guests all the time, if you got to this point in front of me, like we look over your stuff and your team or yourself follow directions. I'm real big about processes, and I learned a lot of that when it came to hiring and building teams in previous roles and positions and companies I've owned and whatnot. But with that being said, some things that really stuck out to me, listen, people like yourself, myself, we podcast a lot. You're a published author. I'm a published author. It's kind of the thing you do when you take on that title. You have to self-promote. You have to market. You can't hide under a rock. Otherwise, no one's going to know who you are. No one's going to buy your shit. No one's going to read your book. So your stuff came over, and I was like, oh, you know what? I think that's some great topics to talk about. A lot of cool stuff here about you, the past. You were working as a defense contractor, as an engineer for quite some time. And that led to, investments that you were doing, and you're helping other people kind of reach this financial freedom. So without further ado, welcome, Tony. I want to hear the whole gauntlet, the whole story. How did all of this start? How did you go from engineer to money-making machine?
Well, Thomas, thank you for having me on. So somehow, some way, I got through your screening process, I think, because I don't think I'm as you really built me up as a guest, and so thank you. I truly appreciate you, Thomas. But I'm no different than anybody else. I put my pants on the same way as everybody else out there. I grew up in a very blue collar family. Right. I didn't grow up with money. Right. We grew up in apartment buildings. Right. This is not, I wasn't born into it is basically where it comes from. Right. My parents were immigrants. Right. My parents migrated here to this country before I was born. And so they came from a relatively poor place. And so they saw the opportunity in this country that unfortunately a lot of Americans don't see the opportunity. We've lost some of that along the way, but as immigrants, and a lot of immigrants today still see a ton of opportunity. And so anyway, we were, given the mantra of go to school, get a good job, go to school, get a good education, you'll get a good job, and you'll be taken care of forever. That's what they knew. That was what their success was based on, right? Because back then, 50 years ago, that was true. You go to school, you get a good education, you could get a great job and be at that job for 30, 40 years. That's just what it was. You stay there, you have a pension, and you build your financial retirement plan from there. But unfortunately, so I did that. So I went to school. I got 2 great degrees. I got my degree in mechanical engineering, and then I also went on to get my MBA. So great degrees that have a lot of utility out there, right? So I got them, and I got that great job, right, that my parents talked about. And then about 4 years later, I got laid off. And maybe some of your listeners out there, some of your viewers out there can resonate with that story, having immigrant parents going to school, kind of going to work each day, doing the grind, kind of having your horses hitched to that wagon, not really knowing what the future holds. Well, for me, I got laid off, and that was nowhere in the mantra of what my parents shared with me, right? So yeah, at that point, I was a young man at the time, early 20s. I had to figure stuff out. And I wasn't financially free, Thomas. I wasn't financially free at that time, right? I was working my job, paying my bills and all that sort of just like anybody else, right? So I figured, I had to do something in addition to just my regular job, right? So I had to become, in terms of what we record about here and what we do, I had to become somewhat of an entrepreneur and figure things out, right? And so for me, it was real estate. I always had a slant towards real estate. I had an interest there, and if you're going to become an entrepreneur, start with something you have a huge desire and interest in, because if not, there's a lot of roadblocks and hurdles you got to cross. And if you don't have an intense interest and desire in something, you might just end up not doing it for very long. But for me, it was real estate, and so I had to find another job first, because I wasn't, like I say, I wasn't financially independent. So I had to find another job, which I did. Fortunately, it took me 3 months. I was unemployed for 3 months. Right. I know right now in time, Thomas, we've had such a great job market. And I think some folks have forgotten what it used to be like in the past when you got laid off. And you were laid off for 3, 4, 5. I've had friends who've been laid off for 6 and 8 months, right? Right.
Yeah.
So that's we've forgotten in some ways what that is like. And so I think it's important for me to talk about that, because I wasn't immune to any of that, those downturns. I wasn't. And so I started my real estate very small, right? And with most entrepreneurs, I mean, I think we all start this way. We start small. I started with just a 4 unit multifamily, just a 4 unit, something I could afford, something I could manage myself. And I encourage folks to do the same thing, to get started in a small way. If you're an entrepreneur and you're going to do something, maybe do it out of your home. Don't go and start, renting out space and having all this overhead. Start small, right? And then scale it from there. Again, that's how I started. And how, we just closed. I started with a 4 family, and we just closed back in May a 153-unit apartment complex. But that doesn't happen overnight. I've been in the business for, thank you. Yeah, I've been in the business for 20 years, and that doesn't happen overnight. So I think, sometimes social media makes some of these things look all like Lambos and to the moon, and it happens quickly, and it's very sexy. There's a lot of, work that goes into it. And so this is why I love, chatting with entrepreneurs, working with entrepreneurs, because man, there's such a passion there. God bless them. We want to, you and I and others, we want to see them succeed in every way possible. So that's why I wanted to come on here and share a little bit about what I do, and, a little bit about my story. So that's a little bit of the background.
Love it. So what does it take for someone to get themselves prepped and ready for that first purchase? How do they know what they can truly afford? Where do they look? Is it single family? Is it some other investment group who just takes your money and gives you a percentage back with sort of this hands-free or hands-off approach? Or are you going, all in like you did? Go find that 4 unit and also manage it yourself, because that's not passive investing. Right. I think that's a really good myth that people throw around too, is, oh, it's passive. Like, no, not really. Because when you're getting called at 3 a.m. to go fix a toilet or a leak or something, like, that's not passive, sir. That's work.
Yeah, exactly. And
where do they start?
That's a you ask some hard questions, Thomas. And that is something, it's something everybody has to, consider for themselves. It's a case by case answer. Some folks, like myself, I grew up with a father who, pretty much required me to be by his side and work with him as he was doing repairs and fixing different things. And so I just naturally kind of developed a mechanical ability and a working knowledge of how to do a bunch of things. And also, I think with me was ingrained that sense of, not being intimidated by things I don't know, like how to fix. Like if there was a dishwasher that was broken, right? I wouldn't be intimidated by not knowing how to fix that. I mean, the thing I always go in with was, Well, it's broke. I can't broke it anymore. So let's just work from here and try to get it back up and running. So things
Yeah.
like that helped me along the way. But not everybody is like me and wants to be hands-on. For those that do, great. Maybe having a multifamily is something they want to manage themselves. But if they don't,
Mhm.
there's options to hire a property manager. That's okay. There's no shame in that. I know doctors and lawyers and others who are working all day, you know, treating patients and clients and all that sort of stuff. They don't have time to pick up phone calls, and so they have property managers, and that's perfectly fine.
Mhm.
Other folks, want to be involved in the repairs. So it takes a certain type of person, and you have to internalize that and be kind of be ready for those sort of things. So you got to know how you're built,
Mhm.
and so sometimes that takes a little bit of a self discovery. The other part of getting started is also how much capital do you have? How much
Mhm.
money do you have to invest? And that may lean you towards investing in maybe a condo that's a little less money to get started. You might make a little less money as far as cash flow, but there's a lower barrier to entry in terms of down payment. Or maybe to your point, I love it. Single family homes doing like a fix and flip, right? If there's something that you can afford because it needs a lot of repair, and say you're that handy person, that handy man, that handy woman that likes to go in and do the demo and do the repairs. Great. That sweat equity can really serve you well in terms of creating some financial independence, right, long term. So there's a lot of different scenarios that can be worked out, and I not only do investing, I also do some coaching on the side with folks to help them discover really
Mhm.
where their value is, and how they can leverage that to become that
Mhm.
entrepreneur, to become that real estate investor. So we do a lot of work
Yeah.
with folks there to help
So
them, but
let's
a
let's
lot of
let's talk
avenues.
there for a second. Yeah, let's talk there for a second. So, you're coaching or helping people discover what's the best avenue, what's the best modality, best way for them to become an investor. Um, what's the biggest hurdle, the most common thing that you see repeated amongst most of your clients?
Uh, the biggest thing comes down to fear, is really what it is, that paralyzes them, right? It could be
Mhm.
fear from a bunch of different angles, fear of failure. What are people going to think of me if I
Mhm.
fail at this? What if I end up with bad tenants? I'm afraid of that. What if I lose all the money that I invested? What's my wife? What's my husband going to think?
Mhm.
Fear of just not having the knowledge. Well, Tony, I never did this before. I don't know how to fix things. I don't know how to pick a property manager. I don't know how to deal with leases. I don't know that fear of the unknown, not having the
Mhm.
knowledge to be a real estate investor is out there. So the fear is the biggest thing, and so we have to
Yeah.
almost like some of my conversations with folks. I would have almost been better served with a psychology degree than with a
Yep.
mechanical engineering degree, because so much of what we do comes down to psychology and
Mhm.
kind of getting inside people's heads and understanding things. And so I'll give you for an example, right? I have this nice young couple I had been coaching, and so we had some great conversations, and they were kind of in that spot of, should I be an active investor, buy my own multifamily, do my own thing with that, property manage it myself, or do I go into like a real estate syndication where, you had mentioned, give my money to somebody else, let them, place it into an investment, and then I just get a return from that, and I'm still invested in real estate, and I get all the tremendous benefits from that. Great. Uh, they were kind of in that space, and so we did quite a bit of time trying to understand why real estate. And so one of the things as we went through it, it came out in the conversation. So backstory is they have 5 kids, right? Beautiful family, young family. They have 5 kids. And so their real purpose wasn't to do real estate to create a second job for themselves. They wanted to really learn the business of real estate because they believe so strongly that that is such a great way to create wealth and create cash flow for yourself. Aside from having a W 2, it really protects your financial freedom. They feel so strongly in that they wanted to learn how to do it so they could teach their 5 kids.
Mhm.
So that was super important to understand because you're not going to learn it if you're just taking your money and giving it to somebody else to invest. You're not going to learn real estate, really, right? You really have to buy a property, go through all those emotions and pain points to really understand how to do real estate and be a real estate investor.
Mhm.
Their thing they keep coming back to, which is so important. We went through that conversation, we had that breakthrough. They're doing this for their kids, right?
That's the purpose.
That's their why. We're doing this
Yeah.
for our kids. This is a legacy thing we want to pass
Mhm.
down to our kids. Now, granted, their kids are, still young, kids, under the age of 10, but now's the time for, mom and dad to learn the business such that one day, the kids are going to be in tow with the parents and say, hey, this is why we're doing it. And you teach them
Mhm.
slowly, right? We're going there to do some, to talk to a tenant, right? Or to talk to a contractor, or, because this is what pays for your college tuition, or this
Yeah.
is what helps pay for the family vacation. And you
Mhm.
start to educate the kids at a very young age. Oh, this is why mommy and daddy do this. Oh, this is a good thing. And those things are, you plant those seeds. You don't have to, really drive it home with them. Kids are perceptive, very
Oh
perceptive.
yeah, they'll pick up on it.
Yeah, you have kids, you get it, right? And they're gonna carry those things with them for life. And that's
Mhm.
that's why they're doing it.
Yeah, I love it, man. Um, Tell me about how the book came about for you. What was the, we'll call it the spark? What was the, I got to do this. I feel a need, a want. And then talk me through the book writing process. How long did it take you? What did the marketing look like? And what are the back end results that you've seen since you're now a published author?
Yeah, so this is since this podcast is geared towards entrepreneurs, I'm gonna lead off with, one of the reasons for creating the book, just one, there were many, but one of the reasons
Mhm.
was really to be an authority in my field, right? And if you're an
Mhm.
entrepreneur, starting out, you go into a room full of folks, maybe you're going to a conference or a networking meeting or something. You could either hand somebody a business card, which is great. Okay, it's
Or
professional,
both.
it's shiny, it has all your contacts. That's fine. Or you can hand somebody a book that you wrote, right? To be able to say, hey, that comes across much more in the form of you are the authority in this field, right? So that's huge. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote it. The other reason was, I don't have kids, but I have a niece and many nephews, and I know they were not learning this stuff in school. So I wanted to put pen to paper, and what was originally supposed to start out as just 20, 30 pages turned into nearly 300 pages. It ended up being something that I wanted to create for them. And so
Mhm.
now, once they reach a certain age, I obviously give them a book or two or three, so
Yeah.
that they can have it and then also pass it around to anybody else they know might enjoy it. So it's written
Yeah.
for really any level. It's written for teenagers. They'll get it. It's written
Mhm.
for I've gotten comments all the way up to folks who are retired in their 60s who have read it, who
Yeah.
are like, wow, this is such an easy read. So we talk a lot, so the title of the book is Freedom at Risk: How to Protect Your Personal and Financial Freedoms. And so it covers the gamut in terms of the avatar, my avatar. Like, it really spans a very wide avatar of who might be interested. It could be like really like freedom loving, seekers who are really into that. It could be folks who are really financially motivated and want to protect their finances. Could be others who are, kind of like raising a family, right? And they're looking at it from, for the next generation and saying, oh, freedom at risk, oh, what does this mean for my kids, right? So the audience is a very wide audience, which I think is important to a degree, because you don't want to make it so narrow that you only have like 3 people buying your book. Uh, so, but from it, I talk about so many different things. Really, the first part is about, looking at it from the perspective of the problem. Really, what is today stealing our freedoms today? So the first part one, is very, very simply, 5 chapters that talk about how our freedoms are being stolen today. Everything from a political standpoint, right? Sometimes society wants to say, oh, it's the Democrats or it's the Republicans. They're the problems. And to some degree, yes, that is part of the problem, but it's not the entire problem. It's only part of the problem. So this is where we educate folks that, yes, one chapter is on politics, how that steals our freedoms. Another chapter is on, society. We ourselves steal our own freedoms. We too freely give up, our freedoms to politicians and others to solve problems that we, society, should be solving, right? So we talk about that, how society steals our freedoms. We talk about the economy, how the economy can steal our freedoms with, recessions, booms and busts. And if we're not aware of that, we need to be aware of that, what those signals are. So we need to understand that. We also talk about the education system, how the education system steals our freedoms because it doesn't fully teach us everything we need to know today. And then we also talk about monetary policy, like the, monetary system, how it's built, right? Because obviously when we talk about, financial freedom, we're talking about money, how to be able to retire when we want to retire. And if we don't understand how money is created and how the monetary system works and doesn't work sometimes, if we don't understand that, we don't have the full understanding of how our freedom is at risk. So first we identify that problem. 5 chapters, real easy reads. It's not like a textbook. I share some of my own personal stories in there. So it's a very easy read for folks. It's stories, or kind of like a storybook format. And then the second half of the book, part 2, is really like an a la carte package. Each chapter talks about different ways people can protect either their personal or financial freedoms, depending on what they gravitate towards. We talk a lot about, real estate in the book, but not everybody's into real estate, and that's okay. If you're more into protecting, like, hey, I want a lot of personal freedoms in my life. And so that could translate into having a big garden in your backyard. We have a garden in our backyard. We love it. We plant, like, in addition to the regular fruits and vegetables, we have a garden where we grow, we have 300 potato plants, right? And so potatoes are a great, great form of nourishment. And so we plant 300 potato plants every year, and it serves us well. And being able to be out there and know where our fruits and vegetables are coming from is pretty important to us in terms of personal freedom, right? Another thing we talk about personal freedom is if you have the opportunity to be able to get a second citizenship, right, and a second passport, that gives you a little more freedom if things go a little haywire in this country, or not. in terms of retirement, if you want to retire to a different place, having that personal freedom to retire someplace else because you have a second citizenship and a second passport to another country may be beneficial to you, right? And then
Mhm.
so those are a couple of personal freedoms we talk about. There's others, right? And
Sure.
then there's also financial freedom. You know, obviously, we talk about creating a business to provide financial freedom. We talk about real estate. We
Mhm.
talk about things like asymmetric plays. And a lot of folks don't know what an asymmetric play, and that's okay. It sounds like it's something fancy, but it's nothing more. I used the description of like Bitcoin. Remember when Bitcoin was like you could buy one Bitcoin for like a nickel?
Yep.
Those days are gone.
Now it's
But
$68,000.
right, right. But that's an
Yeah.
asymmetric play where you can buy something,
Mhm.
buy like 1,000 Bitcoin for a nickel. Your downside is very small, but your upside potential, look at where it is today. You could be a
Mhm.
multi-millionaire had you bought it for a nickel, right? So that's an asymmetric play, something with a very small downside, but a very big upside potential. And so we talk a little bit about that. And there's opportunities out there. So, so those are the types of things we talk about in the book.
Yeah, love it. Give me one example if you could, sir, because I know, in my personal story situation with my book launching, and I've done the same thing that you have. The book to me is the world's best business card,
Yeah.
right? And like I equate it this way. You go to an event, you go to a conference, you go to whatever, networking, you meet people, someone hands you a business card, and for the most part, by the time I get back to the hotel room, it's either trash or the second I get into the hotel room, I throw it in the trash. And if it's someone that I'm going to connect with, like, I will take the information. I will either shoot a photo of it, send it to my team to put into the CRM, or maybe I'll upload it myself. Maybe if it's a personal contact, I'll add them to my phone. Um, but I mean, at the end of the day, like I'm not holding on to business cards. The years of having that Rolodex and stapling the business card to the Rolodex are far beyond us.
Yeah.
And like you said, it makes a massive impact. You establish yourself as the authority immediately the second you hand someone a book. And the way I look at it is this: if someone were to hand me a book in place of a business card, even if I wasn't a reader, I would bring that thing home and I'd be like, "Oh, I met the author of this book. Isn't that cool?" Right? Maybe they did or didn't sign it. Now I've got this cool thing. It's here. And I'm going to either leave it on my coffee table, a bookshelf. I'm going to leave it someplace and I may never touch it. I may never open it, may never read it, but it's there. And 2, 3, 4 years later, I'm going to run across it and be like, oh, I remember I met that guy. And maybe I go and do a little social recon and who knows what happens from there. Right. My point is this: like people throw business cards out, people don't throw books out, even if they're not readers. So with that being said, do you have a specific example of you becoming an author and giving someone a copy of your book that is turned into an ROI, a real return on money, or maybe you closed it with someone because of it?
Yeah, so I share a story of how for real estate we need capital. It's a capital intensive type that as you scale, as you grow, right? When we close 153 units, that deal required money, required some money behind
Mhm.
it, and so I share the story of how my book, really put me in contact with an individual who had $20 million to place, right? So that would never have happened had I handed a business card to that person, right?
Mhm.
We really connected because of the book. And we resonated over, the topics in the book. We would just really, as I say, we would run around the table and we would talk about everything about, politics, about gold and silver. We would talk about, yes, real estate. We would talk about society and the ills. And, we just resonated so much on those
Mhm.
same topics that we just formed a bond. And that bond turned into, right, that trust. Nobody's going to do business with you if they don't trust you. And because we resonated so well together, we trusted each other, that we were on the same page with things, which led to, $20 million, right, for investment. So that's an example, but one of the things, as an entrepreneur is, you want to be able to create multiple income streams. And so now, granted, having a book is great, and you make book sales, which are awesome. It may not allow you to retire early, but it does provide, some amount of cash flow each and every month when you see those, those residuals come through when the book is selling, and you see those residuals each and every month. That's a nice thing to be able to get. And then also, because you're an authority on that particular topic, that book, there's folks that do seek you out to be a speaker at events. We just had one come across for a real estate event. It's going to be our real estate summit at sea. So it's on a cruise ship, beautiful cruise ship. They looked us up. They found us somewhere, and they reached out to us and say, "Hey, do you want to come out and talk?" And I said, "Sure, we can do that." And then the dividend, the side aspect of that is, not only are we getting paid and are we, enjoying, 7 days on a cruise ship, I'm in front of the people who are my future investors, my future clients, right? So there's so much that, so much goodness that comes out of, creating and writing your own book. It takes time, it takes
Yeah.
energy, and it take a little bit of money to do and to become published, right? To do it right, it does take a little bit of money, but the benefits are huge, and you always have that, right? That's like, what do they call it? Greenery, or you always have that to be able to use in your marketing.
Evergreen.
Evergreen. Thank you. Yeah, that's the term I was looking for. Evergreen. That you can always use for your business.
Yeah. It's amazing too. And yes, you're right. Whether you self-publish or not, you're still going to spend some money to produce a book professionally. Now, if you want to just put some shit together and hire someone off Fiverr and get it done, you can, but trust me, people will know.
Yeah.
I have to agree with you. I can't speak enough on the importance of considering to write a book and becoming a author. I know that that's not what this podcast is here for, but I need to kind of drill home the message to those who are listening, right? And you'll agree with me because you're another publisher like I am. Yes, there's money that has to get pushed out front. Yes, there's marketing that has to go behind it. Yes, what are you actually trying to help people with, and how are you going to help them afterwards with this book? Some things you need to consider. But the opportunities and the doors that open, just for me in my own experience, would never have opened if I hadn't taken the work and done the work, right? The sweat equity, we'll call it there too, because it really is. Even if you're not using your hands, swinging a hammer or turning a screwdriver, like, it's work. I hadn't done that work. A lot of the opportunities, a lot of the doors that have opened for me at this point in time in my career would not have opened. Or maybe they would have, but they would have opened much later in time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, you have this upfront investment of whatever it's going to be, depending on who you work with, in order to get the book printed, published, launched, artwork, all the stuff that goes behind it. But you're going to get it back, and you may not get it back right away, but trust me, over time, you will get it back. I mean, just like you, I've got more speaking engagements than I can count that I've gained because of the book. I've had more coaching clients who've come through because, oh, he must really know what he's talking about since he wrote the book on the subject. Well, yes, I did. And I don't say that from a cocky perspective, neither do you. It's just the facts. And we have this thing, this tangible book.
You have value that you can share with others, that you should be sharing with others, right? As opposed to somebody who goes to a networking event or goes to a social or a conference, and what are they bringing to the table, right? I got like you're bringing real value. And as an entrepreneur, you really want to be thinking about that. What value, what problem am I solving for people? That's what people want to know. They don't really care about Tony Lopes, right? They don't really care about, hey, Tony, how many units do you have? And I don't leverage that. That's not what I want to share with people. Nobody cares about Tony Lopes. They care about what I can help them with. Right. And that's the thing. That's the thing I want to help them with. Nobody cares that my parents were immigrants, so to speak. Right. That's just a backstory that, maybe we resonate with because somebody else has immigrant parents in their first generation. And we had the same kind of upbringing. Maybe we resonate on that. But really, at the end of the day, that's cute and that's fine. But unless I can solve a problem for somebody or bring real value to them to help them create a wealth and retire early and financial freedom, nobody really cares about Tony Lopes, right?
It's true. It's true. You've brought up a couple of things here, and I want to put the rest of the equation together for those who are listening. And long listeners have heard this before, and if you've heard this before and you start rolling your eyes, good. That means you've heard it enough. You talked about getting someone to know you, right? We've talked about trust here as well with your $20 million investor. And the equation, and you've probably heard this, it's know, like, and trust. And that's the equation. If you put those three together, it equals a sale. It equals money. It equals something good's going to happen. So people have to know you. Once they know you, they determine if they like you. If they determine they like you, then you have to work on earning their trust. So you going out there and putting all this content on the podcast like you are doing right now, you writing your book, me writing my book, us speaking from stages in different areas of the country or different areas of the world at any given time. All of these things that we're doing are basically putting chips into the know, like, and trust buckets.
Right.
And if we keep doing this long enough, it doesn't happen overnight. If we keep doing this long enough, it's going to continue to basically put that equation together, and it's going to turn into something that's money for all of us. So another point here for anyone who's listening, like, go and speak, talk to people, have conversations, provide value. Who gives a fuck what people think about you or what's coming out of your mouth? Like, don't let the fear of others hold you back from being, from attaining your true overall potential. Right. And I think that's just a really solid message that I'm feeling here as you and I are just talking. And you, sir, have obviously done the work and you've put your stuff out there with the overall intention to help others. And I think that's the best. And that's one of the reasons that I resonate with you, Tony. And I want to say thank you for doing so, because we need more people like you in the planet.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on the podcast here, because this is great. Folks have to hear these things, and they have to your point, like, if you've heard it before and you're rolling your eyes, okay, you're going to hear it again, right? There's a lot of things that we hear time and time again. It's a good refresher, right? And some of the things you shared, kind of sparked that brought back memories for me. I remember the days during my first steps in being an entrepreneur, and a real estate investor, where people were kicking me in the teeth 20 years ago saying, you're going to be a slumlord. Really? You want to be a landlord? Really? You're going to have to deal with, calls at 3:00 in the morning and toilets backing up. And, they filled my head with fear. And I don't know why they were doing that. Maybe it's some of their own psychological reasons to make them feel better or whatever it was. But know that as an entrepreneur, you're going to get some of that, right? And you just need to figure it out. I could have very easily let that stop me. But I'm so glad I didn't. And I dug.
I want to make a point here real quick on that. It's funny how you will never hear a successful person who has succeeded in that thing tell you that kind of crap. Always hear it from someone who has, I had an uncle who tried that. I had a cousin who tried that. I tried it and I failed because I'm just terrible at it. You'll always hear the tip from the naysayers and the people who haven't done shit in their own lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny when I do coaching and I chat with folks. It's kind of we talk about some of these fears, and it comes out, oh yeah, I was talking to my neighbor and and I'm like, how many units does your neighbor own? How much real estate investment has your neighbor done? Oh, they don't have any. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, so maybe you're talking to the wrong people. And I don't say that to be mean. Your neighbor's probably a great person and, probably a
Mhm.
great neighbor. But if they don't know how to do what you want to do or can't encourage you to take the next step, you're probably talking to the wrong person. Go find somebody
Mhm.
who's done what you want to do or somebody who has achieved what you want to achieve. If it's financial freedom you want in your life, God bless you. Talk to people who achieved financial freedom. Not for nothing. I retired at 44. I don't need to be on this podcast. I love
Mhm.
this podcast. I love what you do. And that's just in me because I want people to succeed. I don't need to be here, right? But and I don't say that to be braggadocious. I say it from the perspective of there's people out there who want to see you succeed, right?
Mhm.
And not everybody wants to kick you in the teeth for their own purpose, right? So
Mhm.
find those people, those that want to see you succeed, and go talk to them. Find them.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Sir, this has been excellent. I truly appreciate you coming in here and just, being genuine with me and having really good, authentic conversation. People want to learn more, want to connect with you. Where's the best place to find you online?
So the best place is go to my website, dirtybootscapital.com, dirtybootscapital.com. That's the best place. They can see all that I do and who I am and
Mhm.
all that stuff. If they want to, talk to me, shoot me a line, just shoot me an email. That's the best way to get a hold of me. I check all my emails. So that's
Mhm.
Tony Lopes, Lopes with an S, Tony Lopes at dirtybootscapital.com. That comes directly to me and we can start a conversation that way.
Yeah, love it. Tony, thank you again. I really appreciate you coming in here and just having a good chat with me. Thanks,
Thank
sir.
you for having me on, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast. Make sure you head over to stepitupentrepreneur.com and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode of the Step It Up Entrepreneur Podcast.